World Organic News Supplemental Episode number 3. As mentioned in episode 32, domestication is a vexed question. To that end, it is worth considering how we humans were domesticated by the cultivation of wheat. On the vast plains of the Fertile Crescent grew, and still grows, what we might call proto-wheat. Fisher-gatherer hunters discovered the seeds of this proto-wheat could be harvested by running a hand over the ear and catching the loose seeds in a bowl held underneath. This must have seemed like an unending source of food ready for the taking. This first harvesting was the beginnings of our entrapment by wheat. Over time and over growing numbers of harvest, an evolutionary selection pressure was being applied to the plants. By eating the free-falling seeds, the humans were selecting for the reproduction of those seeds that did not fall easily from the seed heads. They were able to reproduce as they always had. The non-shedding tendencies of these seeds eventually became the norm for certain populations of wheat plants. The humans relying upon these plants had two choices. 1. Collect the plants and bash the seeds free, or 2. Find an alternative food source. Clearly, these humans chose the first option. Once the plants had been removed, the seeds needed to be replanted for another crop. Wheat had trapped humans into perpetuating its genes. The calculations I saw suggested 30 generations of wheat were required for this change to take place. That is, 30 years, one human generation more or less. Clearly there are advantages for humans in this relationship. Cities, civilization, football, laptops are all the current results of this process. However, there are also disadvantages. Unless the straw and nutrient equivalent of the harvest seeds are returned to the soil, it will eventually be unable to grow the wheat. In effect, the underground resources are depleted. It is interesting to note that Australian Aborigines also collected local grains, notably native millets. Their method of harvest, pulling whole plants, stacking them to dry and returning some months later to harvest the grains, did not put significant evolutionary pressure on the grains. The piles of millet that provided the food source also left behind sufficient unselected seed to maintain the population of millet plants in their unaltered state. This is instructive. As wheat was adopted across Europe, curious changes began to appear in the archaeological record. Instead of sampling smallish amounts of many foodstuffs, that is, anything edible that grew upon, crawled, hopped, walked or flew across the landscape, people came to rely upon one staple, grain. And so we were domesticated, tied to the land in a way hunter-gatherer fishers never had been. Once we get our heads around the idea of being the domesticated species rather than the all-powerful agriculturalists changing nature, bending her to our will, other perspectives begin to heave into view. One of the signs of animal domestication is the early onset of the female reproductive capacity. Ewe lambs will be fertile at anything from 6 to 9 months, depending upon body weight and nutritional levels. There is good evidence of increasingly younger onset of menstruation in human populations during the course of the 20th century. I'm not sure what this means, but I also note an increasing propensity for humans to live in cities, in effect turning ourselves into glorified battery hens. As I contemplate this further, I'll produce further supplementals to keep you informed. If you have any thoughts on this, please email me at podcast@worldorganicnews.com. I'd love to hear what others make of this. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back with the usual podcast episode next Monday.